Born to do this. Are you living your life? That's a dumb question. Of course you're living your life. You're breathing oxygen, your heart is beating, you're alive. But notice, I didn't ask you if you were alive. I asked you if you were living. Really living your life. Most people tell us, do what you want with your life. Do what makes you happy. But do they really expect this? Are we just trying to tell this whole generation that you can be whatever you want to be, but do we actually believe in what we're saying? I used to wonder how I would fit into this world, constantly. What job I would choose and how I would succeed. But what is the definition of success? I used to think you could tell when someone was successful just by looking at them. You could tell by their house or how long they live. But with time I've come to realize, only you know if you've succeeded. You are the only person who knows when you've accomplished your goals, and that when you die, you are content with what you have left on this earth. So instead of wondering how I will fit into this world, I've really started to think about how I can change it. Rather than do what you want to, maybe we mean do what you're meant to do with your life. I've had a lot of inspirational people in my life. My sister Kaylee, my parents, my friends. But when I was in 2nd grade, I read about St. Joan of Arc for the first time. My mind was blown. A teenage girl in the 1400s fighting in a war. It's hard to find much more girl power than that. I instantly fell in love with Joan's story. I wanted to be Joan. But as a kid, I only really learned the cool parts of the story. You know, the part where Joan heroically goes to the Prince of France and runs into battle without her helmet on so everyone can see she's a girl. While all these parts were super awesome, I was missing some other key elements to the story. Joan was captured by the English. Despite her contributions to the war, the French did not come to her aid during this time. She was tried and found guilty of witchcraft, heresy, and wearing men's clothes. She was burned at the stake and thrown in a canal. Joan was only 19 when she died. At the time of her death, she was mostly considered a lunatic or a devil worshiper. To me, this story was kind of a bummer. Despite Joan being canonized a saint 500 years later, it felt like her life had an unfair ending. I couldn't help it. I thought about how Joan might have been happier if God had never asked her to join the army. It wasn't until I picked St. Joan of Arc as my confirmation saint that I really began to understand what she represented. When Joan was on trial, she was asked by a member of the English jury if she was scared of being surrounded by soldiers on both sides of the war. Her response could be simplified to, I am not afraid, for God is with me. I was born to do this. I finally understood. Joan had succeeded, more than most. She had done something that seems like a myth to most of us. She lived with no regrets. Last year I went to New Jersey with my family. Back then I kind of saw life as a checklist everyone had to complete to be happy. Doing things like going to school and getting a job were the only ways to amount to anything. But while we were walking down a street in Seattle, I saw the side of a building that really stuck out to me. It said, live a life you'd relive. Now, that kind of sounds like an empty suggestion, probably because you never have to relive your life. But imagine if you did. Would you go to every work meeting instead of hanging out with your friends? Would you waste your life trying to make others feel jealous and sad, feeling sorry for yourself instead of happy for other people? These are heavy questions because most of us feel like they're just part of our human nature, but only we control how we act. No one can fix old mistakes or choose what happens to them, but we can always decide how we move forward. I came across a quote that really crystallizes this idea. Charles R. Swindoll said, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. Moving on may be the hardest step, but it's also the most important. My message for you is to do what you love, but I recognize that some of you are feeling that that's impossible at this point in your life. We often don't try things because we tell ourselves, it'll be too hard or it'll take too long. But here's what I've learned. Time will pass whether you take advantage of it or not. We can't always erase our mistakes, but we can color over them with our passions. Let your desires fill the space you're taking up with your regrets. Let your strengths take up the time you're using to hold on to your weaknesses. I was scared to take a stand for what I know is right, and I regret ever thinking it was better to be someone you're not, even if everyone else thought you had it best. I'm going to replace this fear with my courage by using my voice, fighting for my faith and for life, and not making a change, but being it. Before she died, Joan of Arc said, "One life is all we have, and we live it as we believe in living it." One life. I was born to do this. You were born to do this. So I ask again, are you living your life?